All right, I believe that we are live. So welcome to this spooky session, the OpenJS Foundation's Cross Project Council. Today is Halloween. It's October 31st. And I will just say hi on the chat there on the stream and add the link to the meeting minutes, and we will get things started. Great. Cool. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. To get things started, do we have any announcements? Anyone? Ben, you're kind of nodding, but I don't know if that's an actual
Yeah,
nod.
this is kind of an announcement. I did add it to the agenda, but we should cover it anyway, that there's a nomination open for the additional CPC director. Julian is helping us run that. There's a link to the GitHub issue in the agenda. It's also been posted to the mailing list and also to Slack. And if you don't have it, just reach out to me or Julian or anyone else, and we'll make sure that you can see it. Julian is a project coordinator that's helping us out a little bit.
Yeah, he works at the foundation.
Yeah.
I assume that, but I was wondering if they had been introduced or not at all, or if I missed the call what they had, or if, because it's good when folks who are part of this get to know each other. So
yeah, I think he was introduced. I'm
okay, good.
I'm inviting him to. He should be in this meeting. So I just mentioned that in Slack. So hopefully he'll come in future ones.
Cool. All right, cool. Yeah, no. So I probably missed the call where he was. Thank you. And welcome, Julian. Nice to meet you. In case you ever listen to this.
Cool. Yeah, and it's important to point out too that this is the third seat that we're opening up based on all the work that we did recently, so that's exciting too. Great. All right. Other announcements? All right, I will say it. FinOS is tomorrow in New York City. Paula is one of our featured speakers. Robin will be there. There'll be a gang there in New York. So if anybody's able to come and hang out.
How would I do that? I have not been told about this up until now.
Oh yeah, I always just do a web search for like FinOS NYC.
I assume the foundation has tickets they can provide us, or no?
I don't know. Ben, do you know about that at all?
I can check.
Okay.
I'd love that. Thank you.
I'll put a link in the chat to the location and.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Paul.
It's right near Times Square, so we'll see the carnage from Halloween, I assume.
Yeah, it's a great event actually. You should absolutely go if you can.
Yeah, I loved it last year. I was surprised. I'm surprised that I didn't get a thing on it sooner.
They had record attendance, and as far as registrations, I think over 1,000 people, which is
oh wow,
deal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, great. Anything else from the announcements perspective? Toby, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do. It's I'm trying to sneak something in between announcement and agenda, so that's why I had my hand up.
All right, well, let me just ask real quickly then, board meeting updates, anything there? I think, what was the thing that we asked to bring to them? Oh, the extra funds for travel. I know that that's been discussed, but I don't know if it's been decided on or anything. Anybody know? Any board folks know? No?
Yes, I was there. So there wasn't support for increasing the travel fund for this year unless there's more process around how the spend occurs. So that's a prereq.
I also think that I don't know how this would be handled, but if there was someone in dire need, that there was a request to let the board know or let people know so that things could be handled on a case-by-case basis. Ben, is that fair?
That's correct, yeah.
And did I understand that correctly? You were saying there was support for doing it. However, the board would like the new process in place before we did anything like that?
Yeah.
I love how you reframed that. That's not what Ben initially said, but that's a really nice take on it. And now
Okay.
I understand why you're the chair.
I didn't mean to do anything there. I just,
I can
That's
be
made
a
it makes it
little
better.
I can be a little blunt. I try to use not, the less words as possible. Minimum amount of words possible.
yeah. All right, great. I will add some version of that to the notes here, unless you would prefer to, Ben.
I'll take a stab at that. I think I've got the notes up here.
I think it's actually good that we get a small grouping from the board on this process. I think it's well deserved.
What, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Toby.
I mean, we're responsible for this fund, and our process has been not the greatest. So I think it is an it's a sign of a healthy and good board to actually say, hey, folks, get your house in order before we give you more money.
Sure, sure.
So I appreciate that.
Great, and that's something we should definitely continue moving forward. We'll talk a little bit more about that today, and we'll see what we figure out for the working session next week. What is the date? No, okay. So I was wondering if NodeConf EU was happening already, but that's next week. Is that right? Okay.
Just a quick note. I did put information about Thanos discount in the chat. We don't have free passes left, but we do have a discount code if you're interested.
Great, thank you. And I only mentioned NodeConf just thinking about the working session next week. All right, cool. So I think that's announcements and board updates. So Toby, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to sneak in something. There's a bunch of issues in our tracker that I had marked as can we close those?
Okay.
And I think it would be so I'm adding them in the chat here. I think it would be good to sort of like have a slot in the meetings on a regular basis to go through issues that we're pretty sure that we can close, but just sort of like need agreement to actually do so, or have some form of process to just like make it easier to clean stuff up.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you want to do this at the end, at the beginning, plan it like every month or so. But like these are, these 7 issues are all kind of things where, they're pretty much could be closed because nothing has happened on them. It's like it's kind of stale, no longer really a thing. How should we manage these is sort of my question.
My first instinct is whenever we have extra time at the end, we should hit those. But if you want to set aside time, I'm open to that too.
No, I mean that works. I guess. I mean, I think that's a good idea, actually. I guess could we sort of get into a habit of doing that, or put that somewhere? Or I think that essentially that's kind of what I'm suggesting here.
Yeah, we can certainly add it to the template that builds these issues. As like a reminder. We have the dates and reminders thing at the bottom. We could add this as well. We also might want to just if we feel like we haven't touched them in a while, use the first part of a working session to go through them quickly too. But I'm open to whatever. Let me see really quickly. What is it? Node. Here we go.
Is it easy to update that template? I never know where it is.
Yes, it is. I am trying to get, so in this directory is all of the template pieces. So we would just have to go in, find the cross project council.
Okay, I'll do a PR. I'll do that right now.
Yeah,
and I'll just add this at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, so just so you know, there's usually multiple templates for
yeah, I remember. I did that once already.
All right, so yeah, just peek around for like the dates and reminders and probably throw it around there.
That's cool.
Cool. All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And good idea. Thanks for keeping on top of stuff like that. Great.
If I could, just wanted to note for Ben, I tried to summarize where we landed at the board meeting under that issue for more travel funding. So please have a look, and Ben, let me know if I've misrepresented anything.
Yep, we'll do.
Great. Cool. All right, so let's get into the agenda, friends. We can start with the CPC director issue, although I'm not sure there's much to say here. This is issue 1194. Nominations are open. There's a form for the nomination. This is a part of kind of trying to make elections run a little bit smoother and more easily repeatable. So check the form. This is a nice issue. There's like it's election schedule and everything. Cool. So great. Yeah. Nominations are open until November 6th. Then we'll jump into a vote. I'm not sure if it says who votes. I think it might just be the voting members of the CPC. And we'll announce the winner on November 27th. Cool. Any questions, comments, thoughts, or anything on that one? If not, I will
Very
jump.
briefly, are we doing the vice chair at the same time, or doing that later?
I was kind of wondering about that too. Yeah. Ben, if we wanted to get that rolling, what would you suggest? Just reach out to Julian and basically do a similar process for this role?
Yeah, it can be pretty quick. We can move it forward.
Okay. Should I reach out to Julian, or would you like to ping
him? I would love if you could do it. That's
okay. You
yeah.
got it. I'm on it. Cool. I'm just gonna start a chat really quickly so I don't forget. Yeah. Okay. Now I will come back to that. Great. Good question, Toby. Moving along then. The next item is the primary goal of the travel fund. This issue has been open for a little bit. Emily commented last week. Yeah, so Emily's got a question, I think, for some clarification. He basically says, this is still very confusing to me. If a speaker is not a speaker at an OpenJS event and they're not a collaborator, because that's a separate named category, what sort of person are they and why is their travel being sponsored? I mean, I think the thought was that if somebody was promoting OpenJS technologies or activities, that could fall under it, although I would say it would be a lower priority than other more clear, obvious people we would support.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by his ask there. Like it seems like he's interpreting us saying speaker is being a speaker at an OpenJS sponsored event, maybe. The way I wrote this, and I think what our intent was that like a speaker at something related to OpenJS, right? Like it needs to be sort of on theme. I would kind of agree if someone's not a speaker, not a collaborator, not a standards body person, maybe, we don't sponsor their travel, right?
Yeah, but say, I think an example would be like if, say, Jean was going to talk about Node Next 10 efforts at NodeConf EU and couldn't afford to go, but he got, then maybe that is something we would consider supporting.
But okay, so doesn't that fall under this what we've established?
It does, but it's not an OpenJS event,
right? But it's OpenJS related.
And I guess technically Jean's a collaborator, so that kind of doesn't fit. But
yeah, I mean, I think our intent is right. Maybe we just need to clarify the language a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's just a piece of the rubric, is the event an OpenJS event or a related event where the speaker will be promoting the OpenJS or something like that.
Yeah. The text that we wrote was this fund supports travel and attendance at events and activities directly related to OpenJS projects. So there is some intentional wiggle room there in what related means, right? But maybe that was a mistake. Yeah. I kind of feel like this is maybe with a tweak or two, this is good enough to ship, and we can always iterate on it if it turns out that it's causing confusion, or if there's like specific cases that we're like, oh wow, this should be accounted for.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the wiggle room is good for flexibility's sake, but also we will be evaluating people, as we go. And so, yeah, either we would reject it or we would be like, oh, this is an example where we need to clarify the language or something.
Yeah. And we want the goal to be pretty open. I think, I think Toby originally had mentioned that we don't want to get into the rubric stuff when we're outlining the goal, right? Like keep this high level, and then we can go into more depth in the rubric.
Yeah. Okay. I have a note here that I'll try to respond to Emily. So were you saying, Ben, do you think that the language could be tweaked a little bit further before we think about shipping it?
I mean, we can spend 10 minutes thinking if we can clarify it and then ship it. Like I think we should try and push this. I think his comment is valid. We should see if we can address it, but I don't want to like spin on this I want this to block at this point. Like we should try and move this forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Was there a resolution or a thought on how to acknowledge the diversity and inclusion? I made a suggestion in the comments that we could just say these are the goals, but they're also in accordance with the DEI goals of the Linux Foundation in general. So it applies across the board, or did we?
Yeah. Where did you put that? Did you put that wording in a comment in the?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And
okay.
Joe and Michael Dawson actually gave me 2 little thumbs up, which was nice.
Let's add that, I think, as part of our tweak, Joe.
Okay.
Let's see if we can integrate that. Yeah.
I'll also just posted it in the chat here in case you can't.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Jordan. I was looking away and then I looked back and I was like, it was a jump scare.
Yeah. Cool. All right, great. So we will look at that. I made a note to try and jump back into that. Great. Any other Toby, you have your hand up?
Yeah, on the DI front, I don't know how willing we are to get into this conversation, or given the current what do you want to call it, legislative context around these issues. And I feel like this would warrant a bigger conversation. And I'm not sure this is the right place to have this bigger conversation. I'm not sure what the right place is to have this bigger conversation. And so I don't know. Any suggestions as to how to handle this would be great. Maybe offline if that's easier.
Yeah, agreed. And then I had offered to connect people with the Anita organization, which does collect information for measuring what matters. And there might be some things we can learn there that would not run on the other side of privacy and sorts of things. So yeah, I'd love to help with that.
Yeah, I think we've got an opinion from our council. We've got additional information that we got from how LF Events is changing what they're doing. And I think if this group decides that we want to do something different, which is totally might be the right thing to do, I think we just formulate and articulate what we want to do, present it to the board with the pros and cons and some of the risks, and see if we can get their approval.
Okay. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but do we think this is something we should continue working on in the next working session? Or one of the other items that we need to work on as well? I mean, my thinking is to keep momentum, move this forward. The board won't give us any more money unless we have some of the stuff in place. So that's my thought. Toby?
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly, I think we should talk about this more. And I think that from a non-US perspective, it is entirely, I don't know what the word is. I'm going to use annoying for lack of a better word. It is entirely annoying to have US politics influence how and what is essentially an international organization, how an international organization manages these questions. And so I think that we should at least have the do the effort of trying our best to work around it in a way that um, obviously is okay with US legislation, but not just essentially kind of like cave and fold and like move on, because I think that does a disservice to the broader community, and I don't think we should just do that. That's my 2 cents.
I agree. I do think that it's worth pointing up at the Linux Foundation for a lot of this as well, though. And that, like, you may have gotten advice from one council, but there are organizations like the Anita B organization that is a global organization that does track this. So we have examples that there are ways to do this without running on the other side of legal concerns. But I'd love to continue the conversation. I'm also interested in moving this particular travel fund thing forward. So I don't know if it's a cop out to bump it up to the Linux Foundation and say, we're going to follow their lead on collecting this information, but maybe we should chart our own course.
Let's parallel path this work then, right? I mean, I think that the stuff that we do related to diversity, we can add on, right? I mean, I would say we wouldn't publish anything until we're actually like, we have a decision, we've gone through those discussions. But in terms of the rubric stuff, like, I think we can move forward with that, and just the how things work from a policy perspective. There's a lot that we can still work on while we're figuring out that other stuff, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We can entirely sort of like defer this to like this other document.
Yeah.
I do want to point out, Paula, that sorry if I mispronounce your name, that from a legal perspective, the OpenJS is a separate entity. And so that gives us both leeway, but also as a result, additional responsibility. And so it's a little different. And I also do want to point out that, like, at the end of the day, these are trade-offs. And we, as much as we have a duty of addressing these issues and trying to, do our part, we also have a duty not to jeopardize the foundation standing, given that it's hosting all of this code base, et cetera. So all of these are, like complex trade-offs.
Exactly.
I like the idea of the parallel track so that we don't get blocked. And I'm looking at the schedule, the agenda, and I don't think it's a bad thing to, spend a little time on some of this stuff. So perhaps we should make an issue that would track bringing this back in, or what are our thoughts about making sure that that's not lost? I mean, I don't think it would get lost, but just for accounting purposes. And I'm also wondering, like, what are our next steps? Ben and I can look at the language. We can, perhaps consider that ready to go, and then start to look at next steps. And if so, Ben, do you have thoughts about what we should tackle next?
So essentially, I mean, sorry, the only thing you want to do here is just like have an anchor in there that references a document that still needs to be written. Like, however you do this, it doesn't really matter. Um, but essentially, like, that's the only thing that you want to do to be able to move forward with the existing thing, and then open an extra issue to discuss something. I mean, I think it would be okay to have an issue that says, like, in light of, like, legislative change, or like, I don't know, like, I don't know what the term would be. Um, yes, Jordan, there are
I didn't want to derail, but I didn't know what that was.
there's been
What
is
short
it?
answer, yes, but let's not go into
Yes,
depth. Or
okay,
let's
yes,
not go into
okay,
that one.
good, yes.
We can talk about it after.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yes.
And
so given that, like, reframing, have an open issue is to reframe, like, the CPC's position on these issues, given the broader contextual changes, is, like, vague enough, and can serve as a way to have this conversation, or at least anchor this conversation somewhere? Or is this making some folks deeply uncomfortable? Okay. So I'll just open an issue about this.
Yep.
And
And
you
then,
can
Joe-
reference that issue from the other one.
Yeah. And then I think, Joe, for us, next step, let's get that form sorted. Because it's a good forcing function for the information to collect. And then that informs a lot of other stuff. And we'll put in a placeholder there that alludes to, hey, there's going to be, we're going to figure this stuff out. Yeah.
Regarding the form, do we feel like what you've got sketched out already, we would just move to an actual form, and then, people could experience it that way and feel like we're there, unless there are objections, or because the form's been around for a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love to experience a form, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I move it to a Google form, send it around. We can iterate it in there if we want.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm looking for ways to just keep this moving forward. Yep. And hypothetically, everybody's like thumbs up on the form. Then what are next steps after that?
I think we start writing the documentation that we would need to update in the CPC repo that explains, like, here's the process, here's what to expect. And after that is all sorted and published, that would link to the form. That's it. I mean, we'll obviously tweak it and probably change things based on real world experience, but that's pretty much, we could call that, end of phase one, I'd say.
Could I call out Jordan's question there, because I actually had the same. The goals from last year included DEI, and then the proposed goals removed that, and then there was this discussion of, we got advice from legal, but that advice, I couldn't find it anywhere. Is that advice from legal something that's been published somewhere? Because that gives us a constraint, theoretically, that we should be aware of.
Well, and even if we can't share that part publicly, it would be useful to know what are the regulatory changes that would have prompted any change in this regard, because I haven't heard of any.
Yeah, we discussed this in one of the previous, maybe it was a working session or a CPC meeting. I can't remember. I'm happy to talk through it again.
Probably a working session.
Yeah. So maybe I could, like, reach out to folks one-on-one to do that. I don't want to publish verbatim our legal recommendation. I mean, I at least without clearing with them first, if it's okay. But, like, I'm happy to talk through it. And yes, there are things that have changed in the legal situation in the US. And the legal team outlined those things for us.
Okay.
Coincidentally, I started watching The Handmaid's Tale. It's pretty fun. So.
Yeah. I had to stop watching that because when it first aired, it was during a very specific time in US history. Yeah. And we were like, this is This is
That's-
not supposed to be a reality show.
Yeah, this is why I did. It took me a while to actually get around to watching it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I started watching, well, we can talk about some time. Okay, moving right along.
All right, good. So, let's plan on the working session for next week, which may be kind of light anyway because of events and whatnot. But let's plan on keep moving this forward in a working session next week. Is everybody cool with that?
Yep.
Great. All right, awesome. So if I am going to get back into the agenda here, the next one is 1174 elections and transparency. I'm just reading Wes's comment from 2 weeks ago. But I think the general idea of this is like revamping the elections. Oh, there are some specific things though, huh?
Yeah, I think it's like half and half. I think part of this was prompted because I think Sarah wasn't aware of some of the election stuff that was happening. So there's a couple channels we probably should have hit that we didn't. So for example, I didn't email the CPC mailing list. I worked through GitHub and Slack as an RMI. So I think this is just codifying a little bit more. When we do an election, let's make sure to try, not all CPC folks are in the meetings, they're all on Slack. So let's just try and hit everyone. And then there's this other thing in here, which is around like aligning and batching the elections, which I agree on. It definitely decreases the overhead. So I think working on that, trying to get that aligned for next year is a really good idea.
Yeah, on that particular point, I don't remember what it was exactly, but I remember, well, so there were two things. One, I don't remember what it was, but the other one was that we wanted to stagger the board elections so that there would be overlap, so people could, like, if we got 3 new people, then,
Yeah.
you know, that might be odd.
Yeah, continuity is important,
Yeah,
and staggering preserves that.
yeah. I mean, it may not matter as much with 3 roles. Like, I don't think all 3 people are gonna flip on one election, so there'll be at least one person there to maintain continuity. I don't know. Or do we think we should do, you know, a vote for a board seat every, 4 months, splitting, 3 elections a year?
Not every 4 months. Come on.
I know. I was waiting for you, Toby. I mean, maybe we just do it all at once and let the chips fall where they may, and adjust from there. I don't know. Any strong feelings about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna be like really blunt about this. Either we do elections and we stagger them, or we figure something different out, and then I'm fine. But like if we start doing elections and run them all together every year, like we don't know what the outcomes are gonna be. Like it could entirely be that we elect 3 new people, and that might by accident. And that would be entirely damaging and not conducive to good outcomes. And so I'm entirely against this.
That
Like-
is explicitly why we did not do them together in the past.
Well, yeah.
It's like very intentionally why.
And so if we do feel like this is annoying and we do elections all the time, then we could have conversations about who would it make sense from the CPC for the CPC to delegate to the board, which is a completely different way of looking at this. We don't have to go there, but I think if we want to simplify things, we should probably look at both of these angles. But clearly not do a thing where we sort of like accidentally shoot ourselves in the foot.
What
Yeah.
is the problem with doing elections?
Toby. Toby's the problem with doing election. I'm joking. Toby's usually the one who speaks up about elections. And I think if I can paraphrase Toby, who's on the call, that we do them too much, and that we talk about them too much, and that we plan for them too much, and that we're doing too much of it.
Like, can't we automate things and just talk about it less? And then like
Yeah.
a lot of it seems to be just like people doing the tedious work of posting issues, looking at the results of a Google form, sending out ballots. computing the results, posting that on an issue, like all of that stuff can be automated. I mean, I realize saying that like, unless I'm volunteering to automate it, then like, that's not the same thing as having the automation, but like, that seems like a better direction to me, for us to focus our efforts than like potentially having bad consequences of elections.
You know, maybe the right place to start is let's come up with like an ideal election calendar. You know, like these are the roles that we'd like to see be reelected on these dates, and then see how that maybe that we just organize it, you know, so that there's twice a year, maybe there's an election, and maybe that covers it, and we don't run into the problem that Tierney and Toby were just describing, something like that, just to make it a little bit more concrete.
I like that. That's simple. Twice a year, do 2 board members on one board member on the other, vice chair and chair on separate things, and then you're kind of good.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I think some of the frustration, I imagine, comes from a couple of bumpy elections. And so hopefully once we got everything really in place and a process, and we're smooth about it all, that every 6 months should be no problem.
What about the process is not smooth?
What about it in the past was not smooth?
Yeah.
We had an election maybe a year ago where it was unclear who was running for what. And then it got announced, and then like nobody knew what it was, regular members and at-large members, I think it was. Anyway, that was goofy. And I think that was just, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but one of the folks on staff who's no longer part of the OpenJS Foundation staff just screwed things up. So that was bumpy. I don't remember what else there was, but like even in this one, we didn't email, we went through Slack and GitHub. So I think if we just had a process and could just, run it each time and people knew what to expect, it would be smoother.
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused because we originally had a process, and so I'm wondering where the process like deviated from the process.
Yeah. And the process was a little, I don't know, prone to error. Like people were messaging me, and then I was getting messages through Slack and through email, and which I think was, that didn't end up being a problem. But my point is, we're working towards a more formulaic kind of approach to it all. Google form, this is what we do, this is, we'll figure out the schedule, and things will be buttoned up a little bit better. Toby?
Yeah, to answer Tierney's question, there's actually, I think, 3 different processes depending on what election it actually is. Plus we miss the dates on a regular basis, and so end up in places where folks are technically no longer in their terms, but we haven't elected the new batch yet. And so like the whole thing is like entirely sketchy and messy and unclear, and we're doing a bad job of it because it's too complicated. Plus, there was churn in a whole bunch of different things, right? And so I think that's one point. But then there's also, the reason that we're having this conversation again is because Sarah brought up some fairly good points about the transparency and who should be elected and why people should be elected, and so now there's like a yet a different light on the problem. And I think that like if we break the thing down, there was a problem of things were too complicated. Like there was a tertiary director and a secondary director, and they were like slightly different. It was different processes, etc. So we cleaned up the board stuff. We still have to clean up the members, like voting member thing, because that's still a bit sketchy too. The processes are kind of like there's, I think, 3 different ones with like different things to do, and some are super explicit, and some are entirely like kind of like do an election. Like the other one's like 12 different steps, all wrong. So it's kind of once we clean up everything and we like settle on twice and twice a year, and maybe figuring out the voting members for the CPC and like maybe clean that up too, then it's easier. But right now it's like there's like 8 different positions and as many different processes. Like who gets to vote is different for each of those. It's a real mess. So let's clean it up, and then maybe it's going to be easier, and then maybe this whole conversation is pointless. down the road.
I mean, I think if we keep getting into a point where, because I mean, I've heard this conversation 7 times. I feel like the effort that we put in this conversation, we could have just fixed the doc or whatever the process is. Like,
I mean, yeah, except
not today.
like this stuff actually. No, but I mean, no,
Yeah.
but I'm with you in theory and practice. Fixing docs like this is actually non-trivial. It takes a significant amount of time. You have to patch stuff all over the place for it to make sense. It's actually a lot of work.
Sure, but how long have we been talking about this? I've heard this
I
conversation
know, but like,
for like
yeah, no,
the
but
weeks
look,
I've been in.
I mean, it's it's entirely easier to file an issue about about something like this than to actually like roll your sleeves up and figure out what the problem is and do the work. I mean, and I'm not throwing stones at like it's just the way it is.
Yep.
Well, the good news is we've got a light shining on this, and Ben and Julian have already made some progress. I think Sarah's comments are good here too, and we can figure out the low-hanging fruit and then look at a couple of the other things that we should discuss soon as well, like the voting member stuff as well. So okay, I'm going to leave this issue open on my browser, and I'll try to respond to Sarah's comment, and then maybe we can just this can be another one of the things that we are really focused on trying to move forward. We got a few of those, but we're making progress. All right, great. Anything else on that? If not, the next issue is 1147, revamping the travel fund, which I think we kind of talked about in the previous conversations. So I'm going to skip on that unless anybody has anything to add. This next one I think is also waiting on legal info, requirements for projects releasing internal projects to third-party contributor. So I wonder if like these waiting on legal info ones, if we should take the agenda label off of them and just come back to them when we have advice from legal, or what do people think?
Is there like does legal use a ticketing system, or is it just like send an email into a black box?
No, and no. So Robin has to prioritize all of our legal requests. So
okay.
she has, I mean, I've discussed this with her. So she's looked at all these and she's got like a queue for them. We have to be a little careful with them because they're expensive. And so we have to make sure that we prioritize certain stuff before other stuff. Maybe we could do a better job at bubbling up the visibility of what's being worked on. That might be something that we could talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if Robin's handling it and has her queue, then like no one's going to lose track of them. That's fine. It's just like we don't want to like have a few years roll by and then realize, oh, look at all these waiting for legal issues that no one's talked about in years. So like as long as they're on the list and don't get bumped down eternally, then like I think it's fine. We can just take the agenda label off.
Has that happened, or are you just worst casing?
Worst casing.
Okay.
I don't have any specific gripes.
Okay.
I mean, the waiting for legal info label is also fairly recent. So I don't think we've had time for it to worst case yet, but I'm sure it will.
Well, for the label, but I think that the category is not new.
Yeah, let's not spend too much time premeditating on evils.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me unmute. There we go. I was going to say, if we wanted to just put a placeholder in, I like Toby's comment that this should be, whatever the outcome is, it should be part of the project progression document. And then you could open an issue saying update that to reflect this third-party contributor outcome. And then it'll just sit as an issue until legal gets back.
Yeah, but we already got this issue too. So I think maybe once legal gets back, we'll review this issue and then hit Toby's comment and try to button it all up.
That's good.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. I removed the label. And we'll move on. I'll also remove the label to, I'll jump ahead now really quickly. There's the enable ability to add pseudonymity to the Easy CLA is also waiting on legal info. so I'm gonna remove the label on this one.
Oh, and this is sort of relevant to that. I got confirmation indirectly from Mike Dolan that like Fastify has a DCO statement in their contributing.md, and that is not deemed sufficient to say that the project has a DCO. They have to have something that is like explicitly signed per commit or per PR. So,
Yes.
which is unfortunate because
Also
the
Node.
contributing.md approach is low touch enough that it would be easy to adopt, but that's where we are. Sorry, go ahead, Tierney.
You have to turn on a Git feature that both Git and Linux use, which is the commit message thing.
That would be the built-in way to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
Interesting. Good times.
Yeah.
The other waiting for legal issue is 1059 requirements for projects ingesting other external existing projects. I'm going to take the agenda label off of that one as well. So I think those are the waiting on legal info ones. So I'm going to go back up the list. Code of conduct action plan, 1122. This is got an amazing to-do list. So if anybody wants to jump in and help move this forward, that would be great. It's laid out fairly well, so if folks can help, that would be really good. And then I'm going to keep moving on unless anybody has anything for the sake of time. Issue 1110, standardizing collab spaces over working groups. There's been progress on this as well. I mean, recent progress, not anything to report on today. But this is another one that has a very good to-do list. Thanks, Toby. So if folks can help move this forward, that would be great. I'm looking at this to-do list, actually. Courtesy board update. I think that's been done, right? I'm not sure.
I don't know either. I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So we'll leave that for now. The next one is 1106. This is nonviolent communication training. And I think Robin was working on this. If I remember the last conversation we had on this, she's going to find out like what the sort of expectations would be for how many participants could be in a training. There's a vendor that the Linux Foundation has used. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. And so I think Robin was going to see like what the cost would be based on per attendee, what would the max be, how often would we perhaps need to run it then. The idea was to maybe that we might need to keep it a smaller number, and I don't know what small is, 30 or something, but and if we had more takers than that, then we would maybe just do this once a year or however often we could afford to do it. So hopefully Robin will have more info on that later soon. And then the last one on the list here is 1003. Create some documentation webpage to describe the collaboration model of OpenJS projects. Last comment from Robin on September 18th that they are working on a draft and that it's basically being edited, copy edited. I think the guts of it are pretty well formed, so hopefully we'll have more on that soon. Great, 3 minutes left. We decided on working on the travel fund for next week, I believe. And maybe in the beginning of the session, we'll look at those issues, those can these be closed issues. And if we make good progress on the travel fund work, we can look at a couple of the other things that we were talking about as well. So yeah, I think that might be it for today. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about or share?
Next week is GitHub Universe. Any of y'all that'll be there, let me know. I will also be there.
I will be there, as will Tangent of Electron. I'm sure we'd love to spend some time with you, Jordan.
That'd be great.
All right, well, if we had more than a minute and a half, I'd jump into those can these be closed issues, but I think we should just call it a wrap. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good one,
Yeah,
folks.